The rock that broke men. The icy winds off San Francisco Bay cut through the fog as the ferry approached a jagged island that looked more like a fortress than a place for men. Alcatraz, known to guards and prisoners alike as the Rock, was a place where hope came to die. For nearly 3 decades, it served as the ultimate punishment ground, the last stop for the most violent, defiant, and notorious criminals in America. When Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary opened in 1934, its purpose was simple but brutal: to house inmates who couldn't be controlled anywhere else. The isolation of the island made it perfect for a prison, surrounded by freezing, shark-infested waters and powerful currents that promised death to anyone who dared to swim for freedom. The government called it escape-proof. The inmates called it hell. Each man sent to Alcatraz arrived in silence. Upon arrival, they were stripped, searched, and handed a uniform marked with a number that replaced their name. The sound of metal doors clanging shut echoed through the long, narrow corridors known as Broadway. There was no privacy, no warmth, and no escape from the constant hum of authority. Guards carried shotguns and cold stares. Inmates lived by one rule: obedience, or they paid dearly for disobedience. Among those who walked those cold concrete halls were men who had already become legends in the underworld. Al Capone, once the untouchable king of Chicago's bootlegging empire, was reduced to scrubbing floors in silence. George Machine Gun Kelly, who had terrorized the Midwest, spent his days mopping corridors. Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, was confined mostly in isolation, his only companions the birds he studied and cared for. These were men who had once commanded fear and respect, now broken down by monotony and control. Alcatraz's design ensured total domination over the mind. The cells measured just 5 by 9 feet, barely enough room to stand, sit, and sleep. The walls were painted a sickly gray-green, cold and damp even in summer. Each cell held a single cot, a sink, and a toilet. Silence was mandatory during meals, and conversations were restricted to brief moments during yard time, which itself was a rare privilege. The isolation was psychological warfare, and it worked. Many inmates lost their sanity before losing their freedom. The guards enforced discipline with an iron hand. The hole, a pitch-black solitary cell in D Block, was reserved for the most rebellious. Prisoners sent there were stripped naked, fed 1 meal a day, and left in complete darkness for days or weeks. The sound of distant waves crashing outside became their only reminder that life still existed beyond the walls. Some never recovered from the hole. Some never came out alive. Still, Alcatraz wasn't without its share of resistance. Despite the fear, men whispered plans in the dark, carved messages into the concrete, and tested the limits of what the prison called impossible. The belief that no one could escape became both a curse and a challenge. Over the years, 14 escape attempts would prove how desperate and daring some inmates became. But the cost of defiance was often blood. The most violent uprising came in May 1946, the infamous Battle of Alcatraz. 6 prisoners, led by Bernard Coy, took control of weapons from the guards' armory, hoping to seize a boat and flee the island. What followed was 2 days of chaos, gunfire, and smoke that turned the prison into a war zone. When it was over, 3 inmates lay dead, and 2 guards were killed. The remaining conspirators were executed soon after, their rebellion ending where it began, inside the walls that had promised no escape. After that, Alcatraz's legend only grew darker. The government portrayed it as the ultimate deterrent, a place so harsh that even the most hardened criminals begged to leave. But behind the official story lay something more complex, a system that crushed men not with torture, but with time. Endless, empty time. By the 1950s, the prison's concrete walls were decaying, and the cost of maintaining the facility had grown enormous. The isolation it imposed on both guards and inmates began to draw public criticism. Yet even as the paint peeled and the cells rusted, the myth of Alcatraz remained unbreakable. It was a name that struck fear into the hearts of criminals across America, a symbol of punishment so severe it was said no one could endure it. And yet, in 1962, whispers began to spread through the prison corridors. Whispers of men who refused to die behind bars. 3 inmates, armed not with guns but with ingenuity and patience, were quietly planning what would become the most mysterious escape in American history. But that story, of holes chipped through concrete, raincoats turned into rafts, and a disappearance that stunned the nation, belonged to another chapter in the legend of the Rock, the escape that shook America. By 1962, Alcatraz was beginning to crumble, not just in concrete, but in spirit. The walls were rusting, the staff was weary, and even the federal government questioned the value of maintaining such an expensive relic. But within those decaying halls, 3 prisoners were quietly turning despair into determination. Their names were Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, career criminals who refused to accept that escape-proof meant impossible. Morris, known for his intelligence and meticulous planning, had already escaped from several prisons before landing on Alcatraz. The Anglin brothers, who grew up swimming in the icy rivers of Florida, were hardened by poverty and resilience. Together, they spent months studying the routines of guards, the weak points of the building, and the rhythm of the night. They worked not with violence, but with patience and an artist's eye for detail. Using crude homemade tools, a spoon, a drill made from a vacuum motor, and stolen saw blades, they began chipping away at the concrete walls around the air vents in their cells. Each night, they scraped in silence, covering the noise with the hum of music from prison radios. By day, they hid the damage with carefully painted cardboard grates that matched the cell walls perfectly. Over time, the holes became just large enough for a man to crawl through. But escape from the cells was only the first step. Behind the walls lay a maze of unguarded service tunnels that led to the roof. There, the men built a makeshift workshop hidden above the cell block. Using over 50 stolen raincoats, they stitched together life vests and a rubber raft, sealed with heat from steam pipes. They even fashioned wooden paddles from scraps of lumber found in the utility areas. Every detail was planned, every risk measured. To buy themselves time, the trio sculpted dummy heads from soap, toilet paper, and human hair taken from the prison barbershop. On the night of June 11th, 1962, they placed the lifelike decoys on their pillows, giving the illusion of sleeping men. As the guards made their rounds, the fake heads fooled them completely. That night, under the cover of darkness, Morris and the Anglin brothers slipped through the holes, climbed the utility pipes to the roof, and descended a 50-foot wall to the shoreline. There they inflated their handmade raft, pushed it into the freezing black water of San Francisco Bay, and vanished into history. When the morning count came, the guards discovered the deception. Panic erupted across the island. Sirens blared, boats circled the bay, and helicopters scoured the water. What they found were remnants, a paddle floating near Angel Island, a torn raincoat on the shore, and a few personal belongings. But of the men themselves, there was nothing. No bodies, no footprints, no proof of death or survival. The FBI launched a 17-year investigation, combing through every possible lead. Officially, they concluded that Morris and the Anglins likely drowned in the cold, powerful currents before ever reaching land. But not everyone agreed. Over the years, witnesses claimed to have seen the Anglin brothers in South America, and one family member received a mysterious Christmas card signed with their names. Even the U.S. Marshal Service has kept the case open, just in case. Whether they died in the bay or walked free into a new life, the Alcatraz escape remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. It shattered the myth of the inescapable prison and forever changed how the public viewed the Rock. For the first time, it wasn't just a symbol of punishment. It was a story of human will, of the relentless drive to be free, no matter the cost. Within a year of the escape, the prison's fate was sealed. In March 1963, Alcatraz officially closed its doors. The government cited rising costs and deteriorating conditions, but many believed the successful escape had exposed its weaknesses. The island fell silent once more, its cells empty, its corridors echoing only with the ghosts of the men who once filled them. Today, Alcatraz stands preserved as a national landmark, a monument to the darker chapters of American justice. Tourists walk the same narrow halls where Capone once served his time, and where Frank Morris carved his way to freedom. They listen to the audio tours that blend history with haunting memories, the clank of cell doors, the wind through the bars, the faint echo of dreams that never died. For some, Alcatraz is a story of failure, a failed system that broke spirits and wasted lives. For others, it's a story of endurance, of men pushed to the edge of humanity who still found the courage to defy the impossible. Either way, the island remains what it always was, a reflection of both America's harshest punishments and its deepest fascination with redemption and rebellion. In the end, the rock did not just imprison men, it tested them. It revealed what happens when freedom is stripped away and hope becomes a weapon. And somewhere, perhaps on a distant shore or deep beneath the waves of the bay, that story still lives, unbroken, unfinished, and forever a part of the legend called Alcatraz.